Hi, folks, and welcome to the Meaningful Money Podcast. This is Season 16, Episode 5. This is the podcast dedicated to helping you put your finances in order. My name is Pete Matthew, and I'm going to share with you everything you need to know and everything you need to do to secure your financial future. I'm here to help you make sense of money. Here we go. Great to have you with me once again. Now, episode 5 of season 16, and this season is being incredibly well received, I have to say. So thank you for all your kind words in the Facebook group and in iTunes reviews and all that sort of stuff. I'm really glad it's hitting a chord with you. Hitting a chord? You hit a nerve and strike a chord. Anyway, whichever. I'm glad it's working out for you. Now, planning a retirement is complex enough when there's only one of you. But if you're in a long-term relationship and, if you're planning to stay together for the long term, and you're going to need to plan your retirement together. And if that's the case, then there are even more variables that you need to consider. But really, it's about how you approach it. That's what we want to talk about in today's show. So after we've done that, I'm going to read a review that's been left, announce what we're going to be talking about next time, all the usual stuff. But as you know by now, before any of that, remember, this podcast continues to be brought to you with the help of my good friends at 7 Investment Management. They've been helping me out here, supporting the podcast and the videos and all the stuff that we're doing here on Meaningful Money since the spring of 2011, which is just amazing. So please do check out what they're up to. Say thank you to them on my behalf and on your behalf because they make this possible. Check them out at 7im.co.uk. That's the number 7im.co.uk. Go check them out. Okay, we spent the last 2 weeks gathering information on our existing financial position, working out last week how best to position the pieces in readiness for retirement. Now, we need to add our partner's stuff into the mix and specifically understand how to work together to refine your plans for a combined successful retirement, okay? So, notes and links from today's show. It's all at the show notes, which is the only link that you need to remember while you're out and about. meaningfulmoney.tv/HS5. That's meaningfulmoney.tv/HS5 for Home Straight, episode 5. Let's have a look at everything you need to know first. Okay, first thing I think we need to really understand right at the top is that your situation is unique. I'm aware that there are as many different marital and partnership situations as there are people listening to this, right? Some of you will have been married for decades. Some will have been in relationships before, which have broken down, and you're now in second or subsequent relationships. That adds an interesting angle when you may have previous families and all that sort of stuff. And to say that our view of the future is colored by our past is just obvious. In fact, it's a massive understatement. So when I talk about aligning your retirement with your partner, some of you, when you hear that, you're going to be filled with conflicting emotions at the very idea of aligning with your partner. But if you're together now, and presumably you want to stay together into your retirement, then you are going to need to find a degree of collaboration that works for you and your unique situation. So, if you're expecting me to say that you should just put everything in joint names, right, then relax. I don't live in 1950 and neither do you. But getting this process right together is going to be massively beneficial for you as long as you don't let the process itself become a source of anxiety and tension. A little bit more on that in a minute. I do believe, though, that you should start from a position of openness and collaboration, looking out for each other, for yourselves, and for you as a couple, as a combined unit. So we're going to try and get into the practicality of what that might mean a little bit later on. Second thing I think we need to remember is to keep things low stress, right? And this is something you can decide to do at outset. Working together effectively is obviously going to require some care in the way that you approach the whole subject. Now, how you do that is going to be informed by your own and your partner's temperament and predisposition to the whole process and the whole subject of finance. One thing's for sure, it really can't be one party imposing their view and plans on the other. Right, darling, here's what we're going to do. Or even worse, here's what I'm going to do, and just follow along. Right? Clearly, that's not healthy. Chances are, though, that if you are in the home straight towards retirement, you've already had some conversations about this whole subject. So now is the time to take that further. If you've maybe had some concerns about the general direction of those conversations in the past, Now is the time, as you get more definite about the whole thing, to try and make that known and to make sure you're adding your stamp to the proceedings. It's quite likely, I think, that one partner in the team is more financially dominant. By that, I don't mean that one is earning more than the other. Of course, that might be true, but that's not really what I mean. Instead, I mean that one may generally take the lead in terms of the family's financial management and planning. If that's you, yes, you listening to this, then you're going to need to take extra care to include and involve your partner as you begin to plan your retirement together. And you're going to need to take extra care not to dominate, even as you might be leading the conversation. Now, if you're the more passive party generally, then now is the time to be strong and to really start to take an interest. This whole subject is not one that you can effectively just abdicate to your partner, or at least it shouldn't be. They need to know your feelings and your hopes for the whole process. And obviously, in order to plan effectively, if you are going to allow your partner to do the bulk of the planning, just because that's the way you work best, then they're obviously going to need to know as much as they can, as much as you can give them about your current plans and financial arrangements. I think basically I'm saying that you need to look out for each other, right? Neither of you needs to roll over, okay, and sort of be walked on. You need instead to face this whole issue head on. Okay. Now, I confess I feel I'm somewhat at the extremities of my field here, right? I can almost hear maybe there's somebody listening to this who works for Relate, and they're listening to this and just screaming at their iPhone. You have no idea what you're talking about. How dare you get involved in relationship counseling? Well, that's true, but having said that, I don't think I've said anything there that isn't fairly common sense. Okay? Hope you agree. We all need to recognize, number 3, that any plans that we make are wrong by definition. The second our plan hits real life, it's going to need amending or adjusting. Why? Well, because life, that's why it just happens. Now, importantly, that doesn't make the whole planning and thinking through process not worth doing. Quite the opposite, in fact. To my mind, the key benefit of planning is that it forces you to address things in a methodical and careful way. And in so doing, try and consider some of the variables that you might meet in advance. That way you don't always have to be reactive. You can try to be ahead of the game. So please, folks, keep things fairly loose. Don't hold too tightly to criteria, to plans, simply because they might need to change sooner and then maybe even more completely than you would like. I think that this realization that plans by definition are wrong, right, but that there is merit in the planning process, I think understanding that means that you can chill out a little bit about the whole process and relax about getting things absolutely perfect. Better, I think, to get things done, right, than aspire towards planning perfection. I've had planning clients ask me to go into just an incredible level of detail in their plans, and I will always refuse to do so, to the point at which there's basically a diminishing level of returns. You keep adding more detail and nuance and different scenarios, and it just becomes meaningless. It's not really the point. The point of planning and of thinking this stuff through in advance is to address and consider alternatives you might need to think about, the impact of any events that might happen ahead of time. Okay, so hopefully we're agreed that everybody's different and that your situation is unique by definition because it's your situation and nobody else's. That hopefully should help you relax a little bit, knowing that you can't really get this wrong because nobody has been exactly where you are before, right? So we need to keep things light, I think, while at the same time standing our ground for our own interests in the partnership. And we need to keep plans in their place. They're not gospel, they're just a means to an end. Okay, so practically then, what should you and your partner be doing to try and align your retirement plans? Let's have a look at everything you need to do. First thing I think we need to do is to address any inequality head on, right? I think we need not to shy away from addressing where there is significant inequality between the two partners. Now, by this, I do mean inequality in their financial provision. It's almost inevitable that there will be some inequality to some degree. So if one partner is wealthier, for want of a better word, than the other, chances are there's very good reasons for that. Obviously, I see this most often just because I tend to deal with baby boomers as clients here at Jackson's. And of course, that generation, generally, the man will have larger provision than the woman because he's worked all his life. and maybe she took an extended career break to raise the kids. I know that's a generalization, but that is usual. There are plenty of other reasons why there might be inequality between partners. Maybe one partner has been in a previous relationship, was starting to build wealth, but has had to start again basically after an expensive divorce settlement. Maybe one has had a period of being unable to work and have to draw down heavily on their resources just to cover living costs for a while, and so their resources have been depleted. I think the important thing here is to address inequality where it exists. So chances are, if you are the partner that has the most provision, then you probably don't think about this inequality that much. But I can guarantee you that your partner does. All right. And for that reason alone, you're going to need to address it as a couple. So firstly, it just needs acknowledging, okay? Acknowledging. Neither partner needs to be ashamed of their place and their situation. It is what it is for a reason, right? It's past history. Now we're looking forward. And I think that starts with an acknowledgement. Then you need to talk about what that actually means in practice. So if one partner has got all the pension provision, for example, then there's going to need to be a discussion about how that gets used, how it gets paid out in future, and how it gets used in the household by the partnership. Now, chances are, in that case, that there might not be that much difference from how it works now while you're both working. In that case, usually if there's a disparity in earnings between partners, they tend to end up contributing to household bills perhaps somewhat proportionally. But if there's a huge disparity, one is a massive high earner earning hundreds of thousands a year and one is full-time at home earning nothing, then it's the high earner paying for pretty much everything, right? I think the biggest area which needs to be addressed is not really the practicalities of how money will be apportioned between you in retirement. That is just going to be entirely unique to you, the way you two work. Rather, it's going to be what happens if one of you isn't around any longer. The implication on, say, pension provision, if the one with the provision dies early. We're not talking about planning for a breakup here, by the way, right? But what happens if the one with the larger financial provision dies early? I think there should be a really frank discussion about equalizing provision where possible. And if you decide that you would like to do that, that's a big if, it's up to you, right? If you decide you want to equalize a little bit, then do so. Act accordingly. In my household, I have pretty much all the pension provision. Okay, Joanne didn't work for 15 years. She went back to work 4 years ago. Now, in that time, obviously, my income has risen, and particularly in the last few years. So we are now trying to make sure to redress that inequality a little bit by making pensions fairly aggressively into her pension. It's essentially coming from my income still, but that doesn't matter. That's us. That's what we've decided we want to do. And you need to decide what, if anything, you want to do about any inequality in provision between the two partners. Now, secondly, we need to remember that two become one, timelines, that is. I actually wrote that subheading first in this episode, and I had a fleeting fancy that I might make all the subheadings Spice Girls song titles, but I managed one that had anything to do potentially with retirement planning, so I stopped there before it became ridiculous. So two become one, that is timelines, okay? You've got to coordinate your timelines to a greater or lesser extent. Now, we talked in episode 2 of this season about building a timeline so you know what's coming in when, in terms of your pension provision. Now, if there are two of you, this is going to include 2 lots of income coming in at different times. So we're talking occupational pension plans, maybe any annuities you might have, when you might start to think about taking an income from personal pensions, state pension, of course. If you've got rental properties, you've got different income streams. And remember, we talked about that being secured income. And you will have 2 lots because you're in a partnership, and that's going to build over time to eventually when it's max, right? You achieve maximum secured income level, which will usually be when both of your state pensions have kicked in. So find out what, if any, DB pensions you both have. Find out what your respective state pensions are going to be and when they will pay. Then identify what any gaps might be and how much you need to have in capital to fill those gaps, essentially. Basically complete the same exercise together that we've gone through over the past 2 weeks. That will inform your plans for when you might like to retire, okay? Note the word inform there, as in not dictate your plans about when you might want to retire. At least hopefully not. I think by knowing what is coming in and when, you can at least see if your dream, your ideal retirement dates are realistic. And if not, you can work from there to either fill the gap or maybe reassess things. I think that's actually the ideal order of doing things. So come up with an ideal goal or outcome, dream a little bit without being constrained by your finances. Then see if the finances match up to that. And if not, make a plan, right? Now, if there's a large gap between your ages, like maybe 10 years or more, then one retiring at 60 might mean that the other one is possibly thinking of retiring at 50, if, big if, you decide you want to finish work together, right? So getting the timeline thrashed out really helps focus the mind on what you really want out of this whole retirement deal, right? Really important to thrash out your timelines. Doesn't mean you have to synchronize them, you just need to know how they play together. Okay, number 3 of what you need to do. You need to prepare for life together, right? Now, financially speaking, all you've really got to do is coordinate. I sat down to write this episode and thinking, right, what do couples have to do financially, practically, to align their retirement? And I quickly ran out of stuff to think about, because actually this is more about the relationship. Financially speaking, it's just about coordination, and that is straightforward enough, I think, if you're broadly on the same page together. If you keep the dialogue open, you'll be fine. But in the 20-odd years I've been doing my job as a financial planner, I have noticed a marked uptick in the number of relationship breakdowns in retirement. A quick check of the ONS website shows that actually is the case, right? They've got actual numbers on it rather than just my empirical gut feeling. So the ONS put this trend down to increasing life expectancy. It's like, right, I'm retired. I've got 30 years left to live. Can I really live that with this person? Increased technological proficiency. They also put it down to maybe trying out online dating, something which just wasn't possible 20 years ago. I think another factor, and the ONS think another factor is likely to be that folks will be working longer, hence potentially more financially independent of their partner for longer. And so that leads to a greater sense of independence and maybe a lack of wanting to be dependent on another person. Again, I am in real danger of stepping out of my lane here, right? But it seems obvious to me that if you've had a very long time where you've been separate for a good part of the day at work, maybe only coming together in the evenings and weekends at home, then suddenly to be together all day, every day is going to be a shock, right? I've definitely had conversations where clients have actually articulated with their partners in the room that exact concern, most often actually with the lady expressing concern about having him under her feet all the time. Again, tells you something about the generation of people that I tend to serve very often. But I think this needs addressing ahead of time like everything else. And it needs to be talked about. I think we need to take steps to find a way to make this work. Quick suggestion, maybe you find a hobby or activity that you can start to do together and spend more time together. Quick personal example. Jo was a stay-at-home mum for 15 years. She only returned to work 4 years ago, as I've said, and that's been brilliant for her. And that coincided with our girls becoming much less dependent on us in the evenings. Frankly, they'd rather be on their own than in with us. And so we found that we were actually spending quite a lot more time together, but we found it very easy to just refer to our phones and our laptops, watching some TV, but certainly not relating as we arguably should. So we took up dancing 2 years ago, right? And it's been absolutely transformative for our relationship in all kinds of ways. But, we found something that we love to do together. Now, I don't want to tell you what to do, right? Your relationship is yours and not mine. But hopefully by addressing, if you have even a nagging concern about what life might be like when you have more time together, then for God's sake, address that ahead of time, okay? Do so, as with all these things, with care, respect and consideration for the other person. Don't impose things on them, but be collaborative. It'll benefit you in the long run. Last thing you need to do is to keep that dialogue open. I think the lesson here is to address things head on, perhaps more than you have in the past. You're heading for a major transition, and we need to be prepared in all aspects of this. You know your own situation better than anybody, and you can identify how you're doing as a couple, what possible issues there might be going forward, particularly as you look to retire. So it's crucial that you don't let this whole process be a one-off, right? Keep the dialogue open, keep coming back to it. As life and your plans change, so might your thoughts on all this stuff. So keep talking, okay? I think finally, just a quick note on what I'll call financially dysfunctional relationships. This can take various forms, but really you could summarize it perhaps if one partner is dominant financially to the detriment of the other, and clearly that's not good. Financial abuse is a thing, and if you feel you're on the receiving end of that, then you need to seek help, okay? Please don't settle for this kind of financial repression. It's complex, I know, relationships always are, which is why you need to seek help from specialists. So promise me that you'll do that, okay, if you're in that situation. Perhaps on a more cheery note, if this whole subject of this season, which is the home straight towards retirement, if it's resonating with you, and lots of you tell me that it is, and you want to take things further, you want to dig deeper into the planning of the whole thing, well, in due course, we're going to be launching the retirement planning phase of Meaningful Academy. Now, I can't tell you exactly when. Likely it'll be shortly after Easter 2020, but there will be a founders launch, just like with the other two phases, where there'll be a deep discount in return for your feedback as the content is built out over time. Okay, so if you want to be kept informed of the retirement planning phase of Meaningful Academy as it comes out, then head over to meaningfulacademy.com/retirement planning. meaningfulacademy.com/retirement planning. Stick your details in there and get on the waiting list. Okay? Right, here's a review from Mikey K92, who says, thank you, Pete, is the headline. Such a great podcast. I'm 27. I've just finished 8 years of university, finally finishing my PhD in 2019. Needless to say, my finances are pretty poor, with overdrafts and credit card debt that has built up as I studied. As most of my mates started working 5 years ago and they now have houses, etc., I felt like I had a lot of catching up to do. This podcast has really helped me understand what I need to do and when I need to do it. Pete's explanations are crystal clear. Also, he's a Rush fan, so you know he's legit. Yes, I am. And that, you know what? 22 and a half years or whatever it is of doing my job, all the qualifications, it's meaningless. You know I'm a straight guy because I love the Rush. R.I.P. Neil Peart. Okay, so folks, if you're liking what you hear, then please do leave me a review wherever you're listening to this. It really helps if you can leave a review for the show. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, go to meaningfulmoney.tv/iTunes. That's what Mikey K92 did to leave his review. It just helps folks to hear about the show, subscribe, and it keeps me near the top of the rankings. So thank you in advance for doing that. Don't forget also that the first phase of Meaningful Academy, that's the financial foundations phase, is open to everybody. So if you're listening to me bang on about retirement and stuff and you think, well, I'm nowhere near there, I just want to know how to set a budget or how to take out the life insurance I need. What does that even mean? You know, what is a pension? What's an ISA? How do I even start to think about setting goals or all that stuff? Debt elimination is a big one too. Then all that good stuff is in the financial foundations phase of Meaningful Academy. There is video lessons, worksheets, calculators, everything, plus a private Facebook group, which I jump in and do Facebook Live broadcasts too. So if you want to start your personal financial journey on the right foot, what you need to do is to head over to meaningfulacademy.com. All the info you need to make a decision is there. Don't forget, if you're a podcast listener, you get 25% off, right? There's a coupon code. Simply put in podcast25 as the coupon, and there's instructions on how to do that on the sign-up form. Okay, right, next time, we're going to be reinforcing the fact that cash flow is king, or queen, depending on your perspective, but cash flow is all important, all right? And especially so in retirement. So that's it, folks, for this session of the podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was helpful. Comments, questions, and links and notes and all that sort of stuff are at the show notes, meaningfulmoney.tv/HS5. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for your feedback on this season. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I'll talk to you next week. Cheers.